It started as Hitler's personal bodyguard in 1933 and it grew to a full Panzer division that took part in major campaigns during the Second World War. In this formations episode, we're going to talk about the SS Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, the very first Waffen-SS division of the Third Reich. We must note that the title of Waffen-SS did not become official until 1940. The SS, which stands for Schutzstaffel, which can be translated as Protection Squadron, was originally a personal bodyguard formation of Adolf Hitler and set up in 1923. Since the SA Sturmabteilung under Ernst Röhm became larger, Hitler feared these men might one day turn against him. After the failed Bierkeller Putsch, Hitler went to prison, and upon his release, the need for a personal protection force grew bigger. In 1925, the name Schutzstaffel was introduced by Hermann Göring. By 1933, it had grown to 55,000 men. Its boss, Heinrich Himmler, consolidated his power after the Night of the Long Knives, which occurred in 1934, where the SA's competition was wiped out. As a result, the SS could now fully militarize, which happened with the establishment of the SS Verfügungstruppe, SS dispositional troops. And this was the beginning of the Waffen-SS. The unit we are discussing went by different names. It started at the SS Stabwache Berlin in March 1933, changed names several times during that year to be renamed Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler in 1934. It would receive its final name in October 1943, the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler. Most of the time the unit was under command of Sepp Dietrich. In the later stages of World War II, commanders came and went. Theodor Bisch, 43-44, Wilhelm Mohnke, 44-45, and Otto Kuhn in 45. The Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, the LSSAH, was Adolf Hitler's personal bodyguard. This was initially the size of a regiment. It grew bigger to an elite divisional sized unit. The term Leibstandarte is derived from the word Leibgarde, which means bodyguard. And Standarte is the SS word for a regimental unit. From its inauguration, November 1933, it steadily grew in size, and by 1934, it had just under 1,000 men. Graduates from the new leadership training school at Bad Tölz began to be assigned. Kurt Meyer, who was later to become one of the division's commanders, was one of the first. During this period, Commander Sepp Dietrich succeeded in having the Leibstandarte recognized as a military rather than a political formation. 1935 brought the LSSAH into rapid development as a military unit, helped in no small part by Hitler's decree on the 2nd of February, which stipulated that LSSAH personnel were to be treated in the same way as the members of the Wehrmacht, up to including their being made combat ready. Not long after, they were put on the same pay scale and given the same status as far as military service obligations were concerned. Field grey uniforms were issued. The LSSAH provided the honor guard detail at many of the Nuremberg rallies and took part in the 1935 reoccupation of the Saarland. The unit continued to serve in its initial role of guarding the Chancellery and providing an honor guard for the Führer, and also played a role during both the Winter and Summer Olympic Games in the following year. During these events, the traditional black uniform was worn, complete with distinctive white leather parade equipment. By 1937, the Leibstandarte was recognized by many as an elite formation, and young Germans sought to join its ranks. Among these would be the 22-year-old Michael Wittmann, who was accepted into the Leibstandarte training school at Berlin-Lichterfelde in April of that year. He would later become a Panzer Ace, a highly decorated tank commander. The Leibstandarte was the vanguard of the march into Austria as part of the Anschluss, and in 1938 the unit took part in the occupation of the Sudetenland. By 1939, the LSSAH was a full infantry regiment with 3 infantry battalions, an artillery battalion, and anti-tank, reconnaissance, and engineer subunits. Do notice there were different uniforms, the ceremonial black uniforms and field grey that was worn in the field. Their unit insignia was a skeleton key. The men of the LSSAH had a distinctive LAH shoulder cipher, which was to distinguish the members of the Leibstandarte from other units of the SS, Adolf Hitler in traditional Sütterlin script. Now in the future I would love to dedicate a full episode on ranks, uniforms and equipment of the Waffen-SS. The LSSAH played a very important role during major campaigns of the Second World War. They came into action when World War II started, with the German German invasion of Poland. They took part in battles near Łódź, Warsaw and Modlin. During the Polish campaign they suffered over 400 casualties. Later an artillery battalion was added to the unit. During the 1940 attack on the west, the unit crossed the IJssel River near Zutphen in the Netherlands. They covered 75 kilometers, 46 miles in a single day, and expressed great enthusiasm for battle. It was given the Leibstandarte, Hitler's personal banner, as its regimental flag, as a reward. After the surrender of the Netherlands on May 15th, the regiment was then moved south to France. They held the perimeter around Dunkirk and reduced the size of the pocket. In April 1941, the LSSAH drove into Greece and captured several points. Irad officer Kurt Meyer motivated his troops to storm forward by throwing hand grenades at their feet, giving them no option but to leap out and storm forwards. It was the invasion of the Soviet Union that put the unit to its greatest test. Now an 11,000 men strong brigade was part of Army Group South and captured Kherson, Taganrog and Rostov-on-Don. Here SS officer Heinrich Springer earned the Knight's Cross for his daring capture of a vital bridge over the River Don. However, the Germans were driven out of Rostov and the unit saw defensive battles during the winter of 1941-42. The unit gained respect by Wehrmacht generals, who up until that point often looked down on the Waffen-SS, but it did not come without a cost, because they had suffered 5,200 casualties. In June 1942, they were moved to France. The unit was reinforced and reformed and had to conduct additional training. They also received heavy armor, talking about the Tiger tank. Early 1943, the unit was rushed back to the Eastern Front. Stalingrad had fallen, and the situation over there was deteriorating severely. Under Paul Hauser, it had to defend Kharkov, or Kharkiv, from falling into the hands of the Red Army. They were gravely outnumbered, and Hauser, he refused the unit to be sacrificed just to satisfy Hitler's no withdrawal policy. Mid-February, the city was abandoned, yet shortly after, they recaptured the city. The recapture of Kharkov costed the unit over 4,000 deadly casualties. They changed the name of the Red Square of the city into Platz der Leibstandarte to honor the unit. Luftwaffe soldiers had to make up the battlefield casualties, much to the disliking of Commander Dietrich. But it got worse, as many experienced officers and NCOs were transferred to the new 12th SS Division Hitlerjugend. Shortly after, the Leibstandarte took part in the Battle of Kursk. After making good progress, initially the tanks clashed with enemy tanks near Prokhorovka, which became the biggest armored battle in history. Then the news came of the Allied landings in Sicily, and the LSSAH was sent westwards to counter the Allied threat in Italy. As Italy surrendered, they assisted with disarming Italian soldiers. Then they went east again. Near Zhytomyr in Ukraine, they suffered huge losses, and the whole unit was almost annihilated in an encirclement. In April 1944, the surviving remnants were withdrawn to France for refitting. They were ready for battle when the Allies had landed at Normandy. For almost 3 weeks after the landing, they were held in reserve, minus some elements of the unit. Around Caen, they fought against overwhelming odds, with complete enemy air dominance and in range of Allied naval gunfire. In a counteroffensive on Avranches, they lost much material. They escaped the encirclement of the Falaise pocket, but had lost its tanks and artillery and suffered over 5,000 casualties. The unit was then pulled back to Germany for refitting once again. In December 1944, the unit was split into temporary battle groups known as Kampfgruppe, among which Kampfgruppe Piper. These groups played a leading part in the Ardennes counteroffensive. After initial problems, they did make real progress. They later got bogged down, and by the 24th of December, Piper had no hope of further advancing and was in danger of being cut off. They therefore destroyed their heavy material and pulled back. And they were pulled back right before a major offensive on the Eastern Front was taking place. And that took place in March 1945 in Hungary, and it was named Operation Spring Awakening. Part of the 6th SS Panzer Army under Sepp Dietrich, they made progress, but painfully slow, as many of its heavy tanks sunk in the mud. They advanced 3 kilometers, 2 miles on the first day, but then the reconnaissance units led by Piper managed to advance over 72 kilometers in the days after. However, a Soviet counter-offensive ruined the chance of the German bulk to catch up with the advancing units. The Hungarian units disintegrated on their flank. The weather conditions and conditions on the ground had slowed down the Axis forces, but they now also slowed down the Red Army, and thus the Germans could orderly retreat. I read that Hitler was so outraged that he ordered the cuff bands of the unit to be removed. Now, from what I believe, Sepp Dietrich simply refused to pass on the order. In reality, the soldiers had already removed their cuff band, not to be recognized by Red Army forces. They fought in the Battle of Vienna, and the unit numbered less than 1,600 men and just 16 tanks, 10% of its normal strength. In the closing weeks of the war, they fought pitched battles in Austria and retreated to the west, where they surrendered to the Western Allies on the 8th of May. During the war, the troops of the LSSAH killed 80 Allied POWs in Belgium on the 28th of May 1940, known as the Wormhout Massacre. During the Ardennes Offensive, Piper's troops shot 83 US POWs. From parade troops, they had evolved in one of the most regarded combat formations of the Third Reich. The saying went, every unit wants to have the Leibstandarte by its side because of their sheer toughness, self-discipline, and unshakable calm in crisis situations. Despite the tarnishing of the reputations of many Waffen-SS units by atrocities, also the LSSAH committed them. Do notice these were fanatic Nazis. It must be noted that it was one of the best performing German formations of the war. A total of 52 soldiers had been decorated with the highest decoration, the Knight's Cross. If you want to learn about a SS formation that was not so effective, I made a video about the SS Kama, the forgotten Bosnian Muslim Waffen-SS unit. Click right here. And I mentioned the Battle of Vienna. I also made an episode on that. Click here. Thanks for watching. I see you later.